Hi everybody, I'm Ralph Ben-Murgy, and this is Not That Kind of Rabbi. As I clarify on every episode, I'm not a rabbi, but if I was, I wouldn't be that kind of rabbi. Today I want to talk a little bit before I introduce my guest, and I'm very excited to speak to her, but I really feel there's this word, it's become a 4-letter word, even though it's a 3-letter word. So I wanted to just talk a bit about it. And the 4-letter, 3-letter word is God. That if you say to somebody, I believe in God, first of all, every person would have a different definition of what they just said. But the other part is what a lot of people hear is, I'm nuts. They don't hear I believe in God. They think, oh, you believe in fairy tales, as I was told by Richard Dawkins, who famously has been writing for years about religion being just ridiculous. I was invited years ago when his first book came out to a dinner that the publisher was throwing. There's about 14 of us there, but I was sitting beside him, and he was, banging on about how stupid it all is and how science is truth and faith is not. And I said, well, I happen to believe that mystery is important in a person's life. It's not all answerable, and nor should it be. And he said, are you religious? And I said, I guess you could call me religiously progressive, and yes. He said, well, that's ridiculous. And I thought, if on no other level than pure humanity and sensitivity, I think you just failed a spiritual test, because you may actually feel that I'm ridiculous, but you probably shouldn't be sharing it with me because we don't really know each other. If you've had more than ample proof after many years of trying to be my friend that I'm ridiculous, knock yourself out. But at dinner, halfway through the second course, I would probably withhold that kind of a judgment. So I really wasn't crazy about it. But the thing is, think to yourself, first of all, when you look at Pew Research polls and things like that, it's amazing how many people say they believe in God. And yet in public discourse, at dinner parties or anywhere else, it's like, who voted for that guy? I didn't. Well, somebody did. So it gets kind of weird. So I figured I should probably lay my God card on the table, and that when I talk about God, there's a book by a rabbi called David Cooper, and it's called God is a Verb. And it's pretty deep about Jewish mysticism as a path. And there's lots of pieces of it I really enjoy, and meditation and all kinds of lovely things. But in there, what he's really saying is, for most people, God is a noun. It's a thing. It's a guy with a beard on a chair with a naughty and nice list. So, you know where I'm going with this. This is Santa Claus. And a lot of us really leave religion at the pediatric stage. We're told a bunch of miracle stories about people with supernatural lives. And by the time you become an adolescent, you just go, are you nuts? That's ridiculous. What do you mean the guy lived to 900? That's just nuts. So I take it as metaphor, not as literal. I'm not looking at Old and New Testaments and the Quran and as, perfectly accurate historical documents. There are many people who do. They're literalists, and God love them. But my God's a verb. It's an actual action that we're a part of, a very small cellular part of a very large, constantly creative, pulsing reality. A star explodes. The energy of that star pushes neighboring gases together to create a new star, and then that lives, and then it dies. It's the same thing that makes us want to have kids. It's the same thing that makes us want to make music. It's the same thing that just keeps us wanting to be creative as people. So I see it as we're just a really micro cell in a world of 500 million galaxies. Can you even imagine what I just said? 500 million galaxies, not stars, because there are millions of stars in every galaxy. So we're talking about, as Carl Sagan used to say, billions and billions of stars. So we're just a micro cell in the body of that flow of energy that I call God. And our job is to decide whether or not on any given day we're going to be a healthy cell or a cancerous cell. And that, to me, is more than enough work, because on any given day, I'm both. You know, at 9:15 in the morning on a Sunday, I'm making French toast for the kids, and I'm feeling like, you are just one hell of a dad. One hell of a dad. And then an hour and a half later, they've driven me nuts, and I'm being sarcastic, and I'm grumpy and walking into another room and thinking, you suck as a dad. Like, you seriously suck. Like, you've been doing this for 30 years and you're still really bad at it. So our job is to try to move ourselves from that cancerous idea to that healthy idea. And so that, in case you're wondering, and you probably weren't, where does this guy come from in that kind of rabbi? That's the kind of rabbi that I am. So that's my little rant for now. By the way, anybody who's been listening, I really appreciate it. Tell your friends, tell them to subscribe. Go to your nearest podcatcher, and you will find Not That Kind of Rabbi, and we'll build a community together, because I want your input too. And you can input by going to @RalphBenMurgy, or you can just do ralphbenmurgy@gmail.com. And if you hear something on the show, tell me what you think about it, and we'll just keep growing this entity in the creative pulse of everything. That said, Damhnait Doyle is my guest, and Damhnait and I have never spoken.
No.
Never.
Well, I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm fascinated by everything that you just said, and I have so many thoughts about it.
Hit me.
Well, I've been really ruminating on this thought for years and years and years. I mean, we're really living in an era where there's a mental health crisis happening in every walk of life. Doesn't matter where your socioeconomic situation is. I mean, it has permeated our entire culture. And I've just been asking myself why. And, there's so many answers to it. But a big theme that keeps coming back to me as somebody who's from Newfoundland, and I grew up down the street, raised Roman Catholic, but I grew up down the street from the Mount Cashel orphanage, which was one of the first incidences where Catholic priests were, uncovered that they had been abusing children. So that was such a huge scar on people who had been raised Catholic and people in Newfoundland, and to just drive by that orphanage, which is now a grocery store. And that was the moment in me where I realized I couldn't rely on religion as I had known it.
Right.
So that created a fault line in my life. So what I, as an adult, I'm 44 now, so since I've been 19 years old, I've been finding these same communities on my own, whether it's yoga, whether it's therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's getting together and sharing that energy, that I realize while visiting Nashville, driving by churches, and people are so exuberant about going to worship somewhere together, that I was jealous. I was jealous that was taken from me. And really, what I find in meditation and in yoga is the sense of community, and it's the energy coming together. It's that collective energy that has been stolen from us, with technology. And really that is, people who are missing religion from their lives, unless they're going out there doing that work to find that community elsewhere and that shared energy and being I remember my first yoga class going, I feel like I'm a part of a group doing something that the entire group is doing. And it's taken all of these questions out of my head about what I should be doing. Sometimes it's really nice to be led. And that is that void, that religion, organized religion, not having that in my life. It has been a huge void.
That is so well put. There's so many different aspects to that. I remember when Mount Cashel broke, as a journalist at the time, that I heard a story from a young man. The one thing you didn't want anyone to know is that you were a Cashel boy, because then other guys would drive by in cars and yell fag at you, which only made it 10 times worse than it already was. And all the confusion in a province where almost everyone was Catholic or Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? And I was friends with Greg Malone, Tommy Sexton.
Of course.
You know, I'd met Rick Mercer.
The best.
He was a young guy at the time. We had him on. I did the show called Midday, and we had him on because we had been told he could do extemporaneously a rant.
A rant.
We really, yeah, he can do like 2 solid minutes and not look down at a note. It was like, wow, let's have him on. So I went to visit with him, and he showed me a film he'd been making, and the film was about his deep hatred for the clergy, it made fun of all of it, and said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I always regretted this. I said, it's a bit bald, like it's kind of right on the nose, like nothing subtle. And he looked at me like, what do you mean? And I realized, no, this is such a deep wound that these, Tommy, him, Greg, the Walshes, everybody had to get it out of their system.
Yes.
And you had to do that too. And you lost something, but for some people, it's lost and never look back. What made you want to look back and go?
Well, because I knew I was missing something. And my grandmother just turned 100 years old. And
Mazel tov, as we say.
Thank you so much. And she still to this day relies on her faith through things that only heroin and crack could heal in some people.
Right.
I mean, it is profound. I'm jealous that I don't have that blind faith in something. So I have been investigating it, and my kids now who are 6 and 7, Mommy, I want to go to church. And I'm like, really? You do? And they'd heard about it at school. It's not a Catholic school. And I said, okay, well, I'll take you to church. And it was one of the first times I'd been there that wasn't for a wedding or a funeral.
How did you feel?
You know what? I felt like I wanted to go back.
Huh.
But I didn't.
Why didn't you?
Because I didn't, I felt like I wanted to go back in that moment. But then
it was familiar.
Really, it was familiar, and it was it was like getting, soup and a bun, that your grandparent would make. So it's not. So
what do you do with that yearning that your kids have? How do you help them? Because they yearn to be part of something bigger than themselves.
It's funny because I have talked about this with my therapist, and because I want my kids to have a sense of spirituality and a sense that there is something bigger than all of us taking care of things, because I want to ease their anxiety. I want to ease their worry. I don't necessarily think it's going to come from going to church, but it has provoked something in me to really get, the reason why I'm going through this whole thought process is so that I can filter it out for my kids.
Right.
So I haven't figured it out yet.
It's a tough one if you don't have, but there was a thing you said about your grandmother, which was blind faith. And often when I talk to people who are in the faith business, that's a trigger for them where they go, you're making an assumption that I'm not unquestioning. And the clergy that I interact with deeply question all the time and feel themselves closer to their faith and further away from their faith.
Absolutely.
On any given day. I mean, it's an ocean tide. It comes in, it comes out. So I don't know about the blind part.
But not for my grandmother. My grandmother has been through so much, and I'm telling you right now, that religion and church, she has she has a deep, abiding, blind faith to it as a follower. And I too have relationship. My father actually was about to be ordained as a priest, the oldest son of a Newfoundland woman who had many, many, many children. And she went off to Ireland. He went off to Ireland to study to be a priest. He was about to be ordained as a priest when he met my mother.
Wow.
And so then
Ireland?
In Ireland. And so then, of course, then they, my father did not enter the priesthood. And then my mother, coming from an Irish family, then, that was quite an escandalito. And, my father went on and did his doctorate in religious studies. But then when I went to high school, he gave me a note. At that point, you needed a note to get out of religion. And he used to teach religion at the high school I went to. And he gave me a note to get out of it.
Why did you want to get out of it?
Because I could do musical theater instead.
Ah.
It was just one of those.
Did he take you to church?
I grew up going to church, but then around when Mount Cashel was discovered, we stopped.
Kind of broke a lot of people's hearts.
It ended still is heartbreaking. I have a friend of mine, Gemma Hickey, who is an amazing advocate in Newfoundland and one of the first, maybe if not the first, to have a genderless pronoun on their passport. Sorry, and they were abused by a priest as a young child, and that the wounds that they have as a result of that are never ending.
So there was a guy who ran a rather major yoga endeavor who's kind of been busted. Yeah. Is it really about the religion, or is it about the inability to hold power in one's hand?
Yeah,
that's what I wonder.
I that's a great question. I would say probably the inability to hold the power. And
I mean, in the music business, you'll see someone really getting it up there.
Oh yeah,
and there just is this period of time where the shit don't stink. Like
absolutely,
it's all a home run. And everything is handed to you. I don't know too many people who do well with that.
No.
So a priest who's supposed to be the holy light of everything.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not excusing them. I'm just saying it happens in politics. It happens in business. It happens in sports. It happens everywhere.
This could be we could be having this conversation about the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
I think that's why when Me Too happened, it brought so much up in so many people.
Sure.
Because on the one side, for the women, I know for every single person, I've been in the music industry for 25 years, so the stories are like endless.
Yeah.
And that goes for every single person that I know.
Every woman I know.
Every single woman that I know. Yeah. This is a deep wound that wasn't supposed to be a wound. Yeah. So there's so many layers to it. But then on the other side, there's all these people who have been acting in a way, with, except for, obviously the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, but there were men out there who were acting in a way that was inappropriate, but they had absolutely no idea. Society, there was nobody in society telling you that's wrong. So then there's the male side of it too, that you guys are overcoming deep wounds about what you were told. What, as a little girl, I was raised to grow up, be polite, make sure people like you. Little boys are taught to grow up, don't cry, do not be vulnerable, which is equally, those are both wounds, equal wounds.
It's interesting when you think about it in terms of what makes a person decide to get up and sing, to get up and make music. Because to me, that's church. That's spiritual.
Yes.
Right? People seem to think that it's not a spiritual experience to be sitting there in a 16,000 seat theater with U2, and waving your arm back and forth to still haven't found, right? But it is.
It is.
And so do you think how did your music evolve in terms of the spiritual path that you've had?
I think it has evolved in that way where when I began, I was so young, I was 17, 18, and of course I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. I was just making it up as I went along. So when you're in that position, you are so open to outside influences, what people want you to do. What's on the charts right now? This is what you should do. You should work with this person. This person just work with that person. And she's amazing. That's who you want to be like. Or have you heard this song? It's all these subtle undercurrents that are taking you away from your intuition, taking you away from who you are. And for me, that also coincided with the beginning of drinking socially at, in any time I went to a CD release party or anything to make myself comfortable, because I'm quite an introvert. And that kind of turned me, I was like, oh, I can actually be sociable with people I'm just meeting and feel comfortable and not feel like I want to run into the bathroom and hide, and
I do know.
Woo. And so for me, then as that went along, the drinking then dulled my intuition and I stopped listening to myself. And I've been, it's been almost a year and a half since I decided to just stop drinking. And it's been an amazing discovery for me in that year and a half to actually figure out what I actually like.
So what have you
Who
found?
I am.
What have you found?
I'm definitely an introvert. I thought I was before, and then I had 20 years. I was like, I'm the life of the party a little bit. And it's like, I am definitely an introvert, and I like what I like. I'm very, so it's even before I quit drinking, I've had years of doing hardcore yoga and years of therapy and all of these things, to point the arrows inward, to have some self-discovery and some discussion about what I want without thinking about what anybody else wants. So really, I just made a solo record, came out about a year ago, and it really is a very depressing piece of work, this entire album. But I love it. It was what I was feeling at the time.
That's a hell of a marketing ploy. I like that.
Look, I am all
Damhnait Doyle.
I am a
really
hardcore.
depressing.
You know what? I am the worst salesperson and marketing person. And I think once you give up, go like, you know what?
Yeah, but it's interesting because the other Damhnait Doyle was wanting to make other people happy.
Exactly, yes.
This Damhnait Doyle is saying, this is my journey.
Yes, absolutely.
And most of us in the performance world, I started in comedy, and I remember the first time as a journalist that I didn't have to be funny when I spoke to a group of people, and how liberating and fabulous that was to just go, hey, I will say something funny eventually because it's already built into me now. But that's not why I'm actually willing to talk. It's like doing this podcast.
Yes.
I'm willing to talk to people about stuff that most people don't bring up.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah. So now you're more you.
I am very, very much me, and I'm a little crusty. I was on a conference call yesterday. At the end of it, I said, and there was 8 people on there, and I'm on a couple of boards, and I was like, I am so sorry that I was crusty today, but that's just who I am today, right now.
So the Damhnait Doyle who emerged in the hot Celtic scene.
Yes, yeah.
Who was that?
That was me at 18, 19, 20, trying to figure out who I was in the moment, and if I go back and listen to those records, that's who I was in those moments, and part of who I was trying to make everybody happy,
right?
And that's part of my journey, and that because I no longer spend any time trying to make people happy unless you're my kids and my husband and my immediate family, and I'm nice and courteous and thoughtful to everybody.
It's not one or the other.
But it's not. Yeah, exactly.
It's not like I'm nice or I'm a horrible person.
But I'm not going to sacrifice.
Total.
Yes.
It's a holistic thing, right?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the kind of music that you started with and that has evolved with you. What did it do for you to play that kind of music? Because I remember I'm a Moroccan Jew.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to Celtic music, when you started.
Yes.
And I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. It was just like, this speaks to me.
Yeah.
What is it about that music?
You know what? I wasn't raised with music in my kitchen. And I was always wanted, every time I go to Cape Breton, I'm like, can I move here? Can I be from here? This is amazing. And a lot of Newfoundlanders had that in their kitchen. I know Alan Doyle grew up with that in his kitchen, but I didn't. And so it was all a discovery for me as it was happening. My music was a bit more pop than Celtic. Mm-hmm. So when I came out and got to go to the East Coast Music Awards and stuff, I was discovering that music really at the same time.
Even with an Irish parent?
Even with an Irish parent. My mother was the Irish parent who, when my parents got divorced and they were living in Labrador, she would go with her best friend, Ray Condon, God rest his soul, and they would go to New York City. And they would go see musicals, and my mom would bring back the cassette tapes of musicals. Right. So I actually grew up on Big River and, whatever musical was out 35 years ago. Right. That's what she would play in the kitchen Saturdays doing dishes. Right. And then on the flip side, my dad listened to a lot of Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson and Johnny Cash. So that's what I grew up. So, but Irish music, no. Country music and musicals.
So it's what other people were doing around you, and you just wanted to get into that flow because that's what was going on.
That's what was hardcore going on in that scene.
Oh, yeah.
That was a wave.
Love Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger.
Oh.
That great album.
Red-Headed Stranger. Yeah. So good.
Don't boss him, don't cross him. He's wild in his sorrow. I love that. He's riding and hiding his pain.
Look at you go.
Don't fight him, don't spite him. Just wait till tomorrow. Maybe he'll ride on again.
I'm not even going to jump in on that. That's so good. I was like, wow, I'm going to mess that up.
I loved Redheaded Stranger. I was at University of Alberta in the mid-'70s when that came out. And it was just like, I've been listening to Les McCann and Eddie Harris doing Swiss time and jazz. Like, compared to what? And songs like that. Salt Peanuts. And then I put on Willie Nelson. I mean, that's the thing about music, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not, I really drives me nuts when people try to say they do one thing. It's like, why would you want to?
And if you if you just isolated Willie's acoustic guitar track on that entire record, that's jazz music.
Yes.
You know, he crosses so many. When I was in a band called Shay with Kim Stockwood and Tara McLean, we got the opportunity to open up for him for 2 weeks on the road.
Wow, what was that like?
It was incredible. So every night, he invited us on stage to sing "May the Circle Be Unbroken" and "I'll Fly Away."
Wow!
Every night, it was incredible. And in fact, we went to see him. It had been 10 years. Kim and I went to see him at the amphitheater in the summer, and so we met up with Annie, his wife, who's incredible. And she said to Willie, "Get the girls up to sing with." So we were standing side stage, and she pushed us on stage.
Oh my God.
And it was just really incredible.
What's he like? I've never met him.
He's lovely.
Yeah.
He's just a lovely guy.
Always struck me as a spiritual singer.
Very, and a spiritual person. He travels with his family, with his sister. That's Sister Bobby, who's, I think, older than he is.
Wow.
And he has a sense of community. And he, has a ritual that works for him with cannabis. And it's a beautiful thing to see. It was really, really, he treated us incredibly, incredibly well.
And as you well know, when you're either opening or backing up someone, you can be treated pretty badly.
Right? I mean, we remained, friends with a lot of those people on that tour for.
So there's the word though, community.
Community, energy, shared energy.
That's your yearning.
Yes, it is. It is, and especially as you know, as a freelancer. Essentially, I'm a freelancer.
Right.
I've been in a couple of different bands, but essentially it's me for 25 years creating my own work by myself. Even with it's essentially I'm at the core of it. And I like to.
So how do you connect?
I
when you're home alone.
Exactly.
Right. How do you? I mean, you talked about yoga and that you felt like, a community. Do you see, for people who have a spiritual life but don't have a religious life, what's their fitness program is what I always ask. What's the spiritual fitness program?
My spiritual fitness program, I would say the number one thing is checking in on my intuition every day to see, because I'm such.
What does that mean, intuition, to you?
Okay, so I'm a reformed people pleaser. So if you email me and ask me to do something for you, I'm going to say yes, because I also have a bit of a martyr complex, my therapist told me, so I'm going to say yes, because not only do I genuinely want to help you, because it's going to make me feel good and it's going to make you feel good, I want to be the problem solver.
Right.
But then, without even thinking about what you've asked me to do, I've already gone ahead and said yes. But it's created then a whole host of problems for me over here, because I didn't think through the trickle down. I just went to that immediate gratification of being the problem solver.
Right.
So now, with everything that comes at me, instead of automatically processing and saying yes, I'm thinking things through. I'm listening to my gut. I'm like, I'm sitting with things. Instead of reacting, I'm responding.
Okay. But for me, that's a psychosocial answer.
Okay.
What's the spiritual answer?
Yeah.
In terms of, for some people, intuition is a connecting cable to something else.
Yeah.
And for other people, it's just your gut. Mm-hmm. Where's the spiritual compass, and what do you do? What's your workout routine? Is it to do yoga 3 times a week, to meditate every day?
Okay. Well, I try and meditate every day in the morning, but that's hard sometimes with 2 young kids.
Very hard.
But I know how much happier I feel every day that I do it. I try to do yoga 3 or 4 times a week. And I connect with my community, which is my family and my friends. And I just to wrap up the intuition piece, I actually, it's a visceral reaction that I was ignoring. It is a gut thing. It is,
Right.
It is something where
It would happen, you'd ignore it, you'd make a head decision, we'd move on.
yes, I am always making the decision from my gut, just from my instinct, from my feeling. And that has created so much joy in my life.
Could you connect to your gut on alcohol?
No.
Do you think people can?
Sure. I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
in higher spiritual practices, the idea is to not cloud the mind.
yes. No, but I don't think everybody has the same end game that I have.
What's your end game?
Which is to live a higher spiritual life.
Right.
And for me, the quitting drinking was one component of a whole wellness plan I didn't even realize I was starting. So I had suffered incredibly from anxiety and depression, and the anxiety was getting a lot worse. And I knew I had to move pieces around, and my health was good. So the first thing for me was therapy. Well, obviously, I've been doing yoga for 25 years. That helped. And then the alcohol piece was after I'd really gotten physically very well, feeling very well, but there was still that component that was giving me anxiety. And it got to the point where if I'd have a couple of drinks the next day, I'd have an incredible amount of anxiety. And I just thought, oh my God, I have anxiety, I have depression. The last thing I would have given up was, I really subscribed to that whole like, oh, mommy drinks because you cry, or mommy needs a glass of wine, or it's mommy time, which is heavily branded and marketed towards mothers as a release for, I had this situation where my husband and I really wanted kids. We were told it was a 1 in a million chance that it was going to happen naturally. It was not going to happen for us. And then it was a miracle. After a couple of years, it was a miracle. We adopted our daughter. We were in the hospital 2 minutes after she was born. And then 3.5 months later, I found out I was 3.5 months pregnant. So they are 8 months apart.
Wow.
So I went from being this footloose, fancy-free musician, doing literally and going wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted, to then being a stay-at-home mom with 2 young kids. And it was a very difficult transition for me.
And lonely.
Very lonely, very isolating. And because it was something I wanted so badly, I really felt like there was no space for me to have discomfort around, having some postpartum and having depression, being so isolated at home with my 2 kids. I felt like that conversation wasn't open for me because I had wanted it so badly. And here I was, I wished and prayed for something and I got it. And now I'm going to complain about it. Like, who are you? I really felt like that, which is not the right way to feel. And so at that point, I really, I bought into like, oh, well, I deserve this glass of wine at the end of the day, or 2 glasses of wine, or 3 glasses of wine because, this is so hard. But it just made everything so much harder. It was like going up this big mountain.
There is that moment,
personally,
though, where it seeps into your body and you feel
Yes.
warm.
Yes.
And you feel like, I can let my shoulders go.
No, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And there are other ways to do that.
Of course.
And the ways for me that I do that is it's so much easier for me to get to that point because I don't have this baggage on my back.
All right. So you reorient yourself spiritually. You listen to your gut.
Mm-hmm.
How does your music change?
You know what the funniest thing is? The next music that I will write and produce is going to be so joyful. Because the last record I put out was very much I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to make a storytelling record. And for me, the most interesting, complex stories aren't the ones, I woke up happy and now I'm happy all day.
I've listened to the album and there's stuff in there that's, about it's not working out. I'm not happy.
It's and
love hurts.
Yeah, and a lot of stories from other people too.
Yeah.
Just being that medium as the storyteller for other people's stories. But now it's I can't wait to make a bit more joyful, upbeat, rock and music, I kind of like, okay, I got that out of my system, and I
Right.
really wanted to do it, and it was great. And now
And
I'm
for a
on
people
to the next.
pleaser, that took
Yes,
guts, right?
it did.
Like, it's like, this isn't going to make you go. I
Yeah.
love that third
Yeah.
song. It was so fun. You know, it's
that's-
just like, oh, wow, that's such a sad story.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I did one of these episodes with a friend of mine who's a comic, John Wing Jr., and he is a lapsed Catholic.
Yeah.
And at one point we talked about, because he had addiction issues as well that he talks about, and he did say, enough stuff for me to go, you know, if you'd had, because I asked him about confession,
Yes.
because Jews don't do confession,
Yes.
right? They do psychotherapy, they don't do
Yes.
confession.
Yeah.
And the clergy a lot of people have stopped looking to clergy for pastoral care, for real social, psychological care. And as I said, you know, it occurs to me that you actually would have really benefited from confession when you were going to, and he said, you know, I think I would have. I mean, I wonder about that with the Catholic tradition, because now we go to a therapist, but
Yes.
it was supposed to be a sacred relationship in
Yes.
which you could do that.
And I that's what I mourn for.
Right.
I mourn that loss, because now it's like, write your deepest, darkest secret on a piece of paper, burn it, and throw it into the water. It's like, no, just go to your damn priest and tell him what you did. It's that release. You know?
Could you do it? Could you actually see yourself going into a confessional booth?
Yeah, and like you, I do that with my therapist.
Right. But you wouldn't go to a clergy.
Um,
I'm not trying to get you to
no,
do
no,
it.
no,
I'm
no,
asking.
no. I haven't thought about it. I I mean,
you'd have to jump over a lot of stuff to get in that door,
look,
wouldn't you?
even though I'm, a lapsed Catholic, when my husband and I got married 13 years ago, my dad's best friend, who is a priest in Florida, I tried to get him to come up and
do the wedding.
do our service.
Right.
And he wasn't allowed. Like the Catholics,
Right.
you have to get special dispensation from the bishop or something to do, because it was in the Enoch Turner Schoolhouse. It was the oldest schoolhouse in Toronto, but it wasn't a church.
Right.
So they weren't allowed. It's like, well, when you get, it's kind of like, I want to be taking a taxi, not the Ubers.
Right.
But it's like, when you guys get your app happening, I'll go back to taxis.
Right.
Like, get up to speed with the rest of the world here. This is the way the rest of the world is happening. If the Catholic Church, the Pope made a really good step by slapping that woman's hand a couple of weeks ago. It's like, you go, Pope. I don't know if you saw it. It was amazing. This woman.
Why did you love that?
Well, because it's like, that's real.
Right.
That's human. He had a human reaction to being assaulted.
Yanked. Yeah, being assaulted.
He was. If somebody did that to me, they'd be getting a smack.
Yeah.
It's like, he didn't care about what everybody thought. He easily could have thought, there are a million video cameras here. This is going to go around the world. I'm going to react in a way that looks good. He had his natural instinct was to slap that woman's hand away. So it's like, okay, you're in contact with what's really guiding you here. That's
As a person of the Latin persuasion, in terms of being Spanishly oriented myself, I realized that's pretty well the way it rolls. I mean, you grab my hand, I'm like, hey, get off me. What are you, nuts?
Absolutely.
Yeah. He's a very interesting man, but the other part of an Orthodox faith, Russian Orthodox, Catholic, High Anglican, Orthodox Jew, Orthodox Muslim, all of it, is the belief is, we're not going to bend to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to come to this.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't keep changing it every 20 years because there's something new happening.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the part I work in the Jewish renewal movement, for instance, everything's up for grabs because you really are trying to find a way to do something different, which is not have an us and them,
Yes.
but have a unity of everything.
Community, yeah.
Right? And unity of everything in the world, unity of everything in you. In the idea that God is, for instance, only good. I've heard that in Christian theology a fair bit. God is good. Mm. And I think, no. If God is everything, which would also mean deep evil, right? Because that's part of the human experiment. Mm-hmm. And the stories are just there to trigger you to look at these things in yourself. So let me ask you, without in any way wishing this to be a reality, when your grandmother passes and your little kids say to you, where'd she go? Mm-hmm. What are you going to tell them?
Oh, well, it's interesting for me now because my husband's mother passed from cancer a couple of years ago, and she was very close to us, called her Oma. And I'm also somebody who believes that, I mean, I can feel her presence. Literally, I can feel her presence. I know she's around. She gives me signs. I also believe that there is, that, you know, that we're not that disconnected from the other realm. So I kind of, you know, we say, you know, Alma's passed away. She's up in heaven, but she's still with us. And I encourage the kids to kind of look for her in signs, you know, that, so it's a bit unorthodox.
So,
but.
no, not in the least. There's lots of people who have those feelings. So if they say, did she go to heaven? What do you say?
Oh, I would say yes. I mean, everyone's going to heaven. I don't care who you are. I'm not going to be, you know, you're going to have to.
Free pass.
You know.
Why would you say everyone's going to heaven? What about somebody who's just patently horrific? Like, is Adolf Hitler in heaven?
There's somewhere else. Like, heaven for me is not, you know, oh, that's the gates of heaven. I don't think I think it's another place where people can continue their soul duties, that they're not finished. But I'm also somebody who, you know, that they need to work that stuff out. And something that I have heard is, you know, people who get to the other side are not wishing evil or anything on those of us who remain in the land of the living. They're still working out. They're still going to be doing what they're doing and helping, you know, the people in this immortal coil until their soul work is done, and then they kind of graduate.
So that's Eastern in its outlook.
Yes.
Right?
Now,
karmic journeys and reincarnation and the soul work.
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting, in Judaism, there's a heaven and hell are not places outside of oneself. You have heaven, and you have your own heaven and your own hell. You're working on them.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So it's afterlife is one of those things where there is an assumption the soul is eternal, and the body in Islam and in Judaism, the body is disposed of as quickly as possible, 24 hours after the death. You don't embalm. You don't have visitations. You don't wait a week. Because the body is just, as Ramdas said, it's just a spacesuit.
Yes.
You know, with a name on it. You know, Damhnait Doyle's a spacesuit. Now it's finished. And I know when my own father passed away, when I looked at him, I thought, he's not there anymore. Whoever he is as this man, that's gone. You can see it in the milky eyes. It's finished. It's over. This was just the vessel. And yet it's so hard for us to believe that on a daily basis.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I want to play one of your songs as we say goodbye. I want to figure out what one you'd really, after our conversation, would fit well.
Do you want one that's depressing and upbeat or depressing and downbeat? I mean, it's your call.
That's like Jackson Browne.
Yeah.
He says that in his live album. It's just, you know, do I do the really sentimental, moody, depressed one, or the really downbeat, moody, depressed one?
Let's do a song called That's What You Get, because it really is about, ties into, you know, what I was speaking about earlier about being a reformed people pleaser. You know, it really is important to advocate for yourself and to figure out I say this to my girls all the time. I don't care what your friends want. I don't care that your friends aren't watching that television show anymore or not playing with those dolls. What do you want? And especially my younger girl, who's a lot like me, has those people-pleasing tendencies. You know, it's like, we're going to take some time with this. You know, we're going to take some time before you answer me, because it's so important. It's so ingrained in you, especially girls, to just go along with the flow. And so it took me a really long time to break out of that mold, but I'm prepping my kids a bit earlier to figure out who they are, what they like. And so that this song is really about, if you ask for nothing, that's what you're going to get.
And what's the name of the album?
The name of the album is called Liquor Store Flowers.
And that's what you get, right?
That's what you get.
Well, Damhnait, absolute pleasure.
I loved this today. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I hope we get to talk again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, take care.
I would have been sober. I would have ripped out my heart, reversed and run it over. I would have been the kindling, would have fanned the fire. Be the one lying to you when everyone says you're a liar. Maybe you were better in my memory, covered your tracks so I couldn't see. Would have been your rifle, been your lifeline, would have cleaned up all your wounds and made the stars shine. Maybe you were better in my memory, covered your tracks so I couldn't see. When you ask for nothing, that's what you get. And I guess that makes me easy to forget. When you ask for nothing, that's what you get, that's what you get. And I guess it makes me easy. And I guess that's what you get, that's what you get. Would have been your nursemaid, checking vitals at your bedside, pump your lungs with oxygen, making sure you breathe right. Maybe that one night would have pulled a little too tight. Maybe you were better in my memory, covered my tracks so they couldn't see. When you ask for nothing, that's what you get. And I guess that makes me easy to forget. When you ask for nothing, that's what you get, that's what you get. And I guess it makes me easy to forget. Little white lies always told you. See those light gray hairs around my face. Little fine lines, they get closer, covering every single inch upon my face. Those little fine lines, those little fine, those little fine lines. Would you ask for nothing? That's what you get.
This podcast has been produced by TMDS and accelerated by Roam Phone. Roam Phone brings you the most reliable virtual phone service to run your business and protect your home number from unwanted calls. Visit roamphone.ca to get started.